Thank you so much, Comrade. A warm welcome to those that also joining now. Today we will hear some impactful presentations in respect of our national campaign. The CJCM approaches water as a commons, a shared resource that should be equitably managed for the benefit of all, and rather than being controlled by corporations or even the state. Our biggest objective in relation to water is to ensure universal access as well as protect our water resources from pollution, as well as promoting democratic community based management. I'd like to give over to Comrade Charles. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, there's a small change. I think Comrade Matthew will be up first. Those that can please mute while the presentations are being delivered. Thank you, Comrade Matthew. You may go ahead.
Thank you very much, Comrade Lydia. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. We so appreciate you being willing to be in conversation with us around the Climate Justice Charter's, firstly, our water campaign and coming out of our consultative work on water policy and as Comrade Lydia said, the water commons and bringing perspectives that we are anticipating and certainly will be important as climate shocks become more readily felt in South Africa, certainly in South Africa, heating at the global twice the global average. So I'm presenting very briefly on our climate emergency social contract, which is something that emerged out of our campaigning work, our activist work, and certainly around our consultation with activists around South Africa. What we know is the climate science is very clear at the moment that the 1.5 barrier will be surpassed around 2028 to 2034. This barrier will be surpassed. And what that means is the global average temperature will go up 1.5 degrees. But in South Africa, as I said previously, it will go up 3 degrees. So South Africa and South Africans are going to have to face already what is seen as something that's going to alter life significantly around the world in places that have municipal capacity, that have state capacity. In South Africa, where we have very minimal state capacity and institutional capacity, we are going to be facing the most extreme parts of the climate crisis and influences of the climate crisis. And this affects our water, of course, as we'll speak about today, but our food, our ocean commons, everything that sustains life and makes life in South Africa will be affected by this change. And this is something that in many ways the rich may expect themselves to be able to navigate, but this is certainly something that will affect all South Africans. And those South Africans that are suffering already from historical dispossession, oppression, certainly women in South Africa that rely and are relied upon to get water, to collect water, etc., will be most affected by this. So we are trying to understand, how do we respond to this? And this is where our climate emergency social contract comes in. So we're mapping, firstly, and this is what activist work like the Climate Justice Charter and other associated organizations have done. We've mapped where the most stressed and at-risk communities are in South Africa, and we've worked with them. We've developed frameworks around how to address hunger, water, mining-affected communities. How do we map concerns from below and then try and address them from where we sit? So the post-apartheid social contract, as we all know, has failed. What this kind of liberation moment is and has failed. The kind of what the state would do, the ANC's promise to address a better life for all has certainly not materialized. And we're concerned about that. And we're trying to put this position right now around how climate will affect all kind of historical injustices that can, if we address it in a way of a deep just transition, which is some of the framework that we work with at the Climate Justice Charter, we'll be able to address historical injustice and address the climate crisis as well. So in essence, what we're trying to raise through the climate emergency social contract is a kind of codesa number 2, a real collaborative, interdisciplinary, intersectoral, interclass perspective, interracial perspective of where are we as South Africans? What might the future bring? And how do we design pathways to just climate futures now? So the GNU in South Africa is something that we were really excited perhaps about. Some people found it maybe a kind of good deal struck at a critical time. The GNU has shown already that while they want to call for times of national dialogue, and I'll speak to that now, the ineffectiveness of like this bureaucratic kind of party kind of centric discourse in South Africa has broken down a lot of really radical change that we need right now. And at this moment, as we have been saying for multiple years now, since the Climate Justice Charter was founded, these moments, these years, these times that we live in are the most essential. We cannot just kick the can down the road. So the GNU has, in essence, called for a national dialogue, and the Climate Justice Charter is a part of a very strong emerging networks around this, trying to figure out what might this mean. What can we do with a national dialogue? How can we give shape to a national dialogue that the government has proposed? And we're hoping that with civil society organizations that we're collaborating with, that the climate emergency social contract can be one of the fundamental pillars of the national dialogue going forward. As we know, the Climate Justice Charter is endorsed by 286, almost 300 organizations now. That meaning that we are representing so many voices in different parts of South Africa that have different concerns, but the climate emergency social contract is at the forefront of all the concerns that we've worked with. So we need a mass community, mass deliberation kind of politics coming out of this climate emergency social contract. We need to engage people, not in the way that we hope that the top-down approach and the government approach or institutional NGO approach is going to solve everything. But we really need to find ways of giving voice to the people that are most affected already in South Africa, and the climate emergency social contract hopes to do that. So really trying to understand how in the kind of wake of all these ecological crises, how we can put people first and deal with historical injustice. And just to raise in a way of conclusion, how this fits into the Climate Justice Charter's kind of structure, what we've done historically, we've already mapped the deep just transition, its politics, its visions, how to really transition South Africa, not the just transition seen from abroad, seen from Germany, America, and the UK, but really how does the just transition, if it is, and what is a real green just transition, but certainly a deep just transition, how will it address all the historical injustices in South Africa through a climate pathway? But some of these systemic alternatives that we've presented are food sovereignty and the food and water commons, which we'll hear today. So this is giving you some structure of the broader thinking that we've done and are doing, and the kind of broader discussions that we're having and movements that we're creating, and then how the water policy fits into that. We've also worked on eco-mobility, one of another systemic alternatives, trying to understand how do we transition transport systems that are so fundamental to getting everyone to work every day, and certainly public transport that has in many ways been left on the wayside and privatized and all broken down in its kind of quality and its function. But how do we really do an eco-mobility kind of program that again addresses all these who's dependent on public transport and the livelihoods it can enable as well? The U-Big, something that is so fundamental to South African politics at the moment, the basic income grant, universal basic income grant. How do we make sure, and this is the emerging researcher we've been working with and some of the top scholars and activists in South Africa, what do people need to be able to withstand the climate crisis and its impending effects? But also, how do we make sure that people and communities have capacity? And the U-Big is one strategy among others that we're working on here: food sovereignty, water commoning, eco-mobility. And then one important thing that is very much left out of broader climate justice work in South Africa is a wealth tax and a carbon tax. There is funding. There are people that have historically created the problems that we're soon to be and are increasingly dealing with. And the carbon tax in South Africa, the polluters that have extracted from labor, have extracted from our environment, and have put us in this kind of future of ruin, need to be able to pay. And this is something how we bring in all these policies, all these systemic alternatives into conversation. But really, in conclusion, the climate emergency social contract that we're putting forward gives structure and asks for a moment of critical dialogue, and not just a kind of fake participatory dialogue from above, but really getting people, organizations, and the people in this room and the organizations you work with and the communities you represent into conversation about what futures are we chartering, and how do we do it in a just way that deals with historical injustice in South Africa. So, Comrade Lydia, Comrade Charles, I'll pass over back to you, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Comrade Matthew. It was very insightful, and I think that engaging in this matter with the climate emergency social contract, it is what we need to do, and we need to engage with it as well. Are there any questions for Matthew? The floor is open for questions.
Comrade Lydia, if there's no questions, I just do want to point out that our website is well furnished with a lot of resources of the systemic alternatives, with deep just transition literature that people can consult. If this is merely an introduction to some of the ideas that we're working through, and a lot of documents, a lot of reports that you can look through in your own time, but also bring to the communities you work with and represent will be online, and we can share those links today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've got a question from Kush. She says, please explain what we can expect from the climate
Emergency.
emergency
Thanks,
social
Kush.
contract.
It's a really interesting question. And I think what we're trying to do now is sketch the groundwork for understanding what is needed, how can it be done. But really, the content of it is developing in national dialogue spaces. And we are using the national GNU's kind of perspective of the national dialogue to give shape to it in some degree. But these conversations are emerging, and we're working with a lot of very wide-ranging NGOs, NPOs, institutions in South Africa, and working in some relation to the South African government. So these conversations are happening, and please, if there are organizations that you're working with that you want to be part of these dialogues, please let me know, and let the Climate Justice Charter know, and would love to have you into those dialogues. But really, we are trying to give it structure and give it content, and one of the first points is the national dialogue with the government, but there's a lot of other things that we've already done, and taking the Climate Justice Charter to Parliament, for example, and just getting the climate politics grounded in South Africa. And this is what we do through the Climate Justice Charter and our work, and certainly our water policy today is part of that. Thank you, Kush.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I've got another question. Yes.
Put a comment on the PCC. The PCC is doing some interesting work, and we've obviously, and a lot of South Africans are following the work very closely. One thing that I personally am working on is our socialized and community-owned renewable energy policy. And while we find some of the really work by the PCC really interesting, what we have found as well is there are some kind of bureaucratic hurdles rather, that are limiting some of the transformative work, but there is a lot of process that some of the work that's feeding into the PCC, we are very encouraged by some of the comrades that work with the Climate Justice Charter, like Jana Cherry. Professor Jana Cherry are doing really interesting work around climate and real climate politics from below, and a just transition from below, rather than large-scale infrastructure that feeds into a national grid, but is tied very much to a fossil capital kind of a national grid. So there's some really interesting work coalescing in that space, but the PCC in and of itself needs to be constituted by very important, progressive, kind of radical thinkers, transformative thinkers, and I think that at times is happening, and at times it's not. So, Peter, thanks for a really interesting question. And sorry, Comrade Lydia, just the last question. What can we do to help? It was a bit late. Well, firstly, I think joining the Climate Justice Charter and bringing in conversation with us in many ways, and of course supporting our water policy that we're working on today, would be really, really important in giving shape, giving content to the climate emergency social contract, but also speaking to the communities you represent and work with to kind of make this case that now is an absolutely critical time for dialogue, very transformative, radical dialogue, not just moving across and hoping that in a kind of parliamentary procedure around it, because that's not getting the leaps that we need to be at. The one point, what we've seen on the energy side and kind of a adaptation side from our national government has not been radical enough and transformative enough to address what is coming. So I think being in conversation with us and supporting the comrades that are working on the water policy, and we have rolling campaigns that are going to be folding in a lot of different issues. I think being part of that would be absolutely critical. With that, Lydia, I don't want to take more time. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Comrade Matthew. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you to Peter and to Kush for your questions of clarity. I will now hand it over to Awande Buthelezi, and he will take us through the Water Commons campaign that we are running currently. We're actually launching it today. Over to you, Awande.
Thank you, Lydia. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen first quickly. So today I will be giving an overview on our CJCM water campaign, which is one of our rolling campaigns. We'll just take you through the campaign framework document to give everyone a scale and a feel for what we'll be doing over the next couple of months. This is one of a number of campaigns that we will be rolling out as the CJCM, the first one. The structure of this assembly is so that in launching this campaign, we can also give a feel and structure to where this campaign comes out of in regards to the CJCM's activism and our work, our perspectives, and what the campaign speaks to with regards to the Climate Justice Charter movement's focus on water. And its perspective with the assembly invites, some of this had been put out, but I'll just continue to go over again as a way of introduction and to give some context and feedback around the foundation of the CJCM's work on water. It is clear to us, and I think everyone in attendance is aware, that water is a fundamental human need and a human right. But in our country, we already have millions of people who are without and do not have access to safe, drinkable water across the country for a number of years now, from the apartheid era into the post-apartheid democratic era. Water is still something that people are without. And in within the South African consciousness, the 2017 Day Zero event in Cape Town was something which I think brought to home for most people the fact that our access to water and the reality of the climate crisis is very fragile. But that event came and went. The understanding of our country's vulnerability with regards to its ability to provide water to people also in a way came and went. And despite that, we still had a number of communities, a number of towns and cities across our country who were still fundamentally without, who still fundamentally lacked access to water, even though that Day Zero event came and went in Cape Town. The Climate Justice Charter itself states that more climate shocks and ecological crises will result in more sun and more pandemics, particularly where the poor, people with the land and the vulnerable. These natural disasters, but failure of leadership. And that is fundamentally how we have understood and see this crisis. This climate justice charter itself was born from the activism of this food sovereignty campaign, which had been developed during the period of our drought, one of the worst, if not the worst droughts in 2016. The work that brought this African food sovereignty together then lead to the justice. It's with a perspective on water. What we saw during the for people to be able to meet their needs. Screen stop sharing. Sorry, let me just give it 1 second. I think there are gremlins in the network.
Wenda, I think your connection is a bit unstable. So if you want to turn off your camera and share, maybe, or vice versa.
Yes, probably me do that. Is it back?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. So in 2020, what we saw was the COVID lockdown taking place, where communities were still without water, despite the needs of water for people to meet their sanitary and hygiene needs, particularly within the context of the pandemic. And we embarked on a process of water stress mapping, where we worked with water stress communities across the country. And activists gave us their experiences and helped us to be able to embark on this process where we could highlight the places according to which water and water provision was still not being met adequately, despite the government's promises during that period to make that provision to help people fight the pandemic. And we were able to do a number of things there in getting activists and communities organized, but also to get some fundamental engagements and responses from both the ministry and the Minister of Water and Sanitation at the time, to engage us on what was being done for them to be able to meet this needs. And out of this also, we learned a couple of things with regards to the state's failures and its inability from the executive level of the ministry and local and municipal governments perspective to be able to work together on meeting people's needs. But out of this came greater organization and focus with our engagements with these communities that also has fed into the process of our development of the Climate Justice Charter Movement water policy, which Farrell Adam will be presenting on after myself to give a bigger perspective on our movement's perspective with regards to water. But despite our activism and despite the process and the scale of need around water in the country, the crisis begins to persist, and it has continued to accelerate instead. And for those of us living in Gauteng in particular, who are so far away from what was happening in Cape Town, are now beginning to experience these governance droughts that have become a reality due to the government's inability to maintain and look after its water infrastructure. So it's within this context and within the setting that we are launching our Climate Justice Charter Movement's water campaign. But our water campaign and focus will not narrowly just focus on what we're facing immediately with regards to just this crisis of water management, but it'll extend and it expands to encompass our movement's more broader perspective around water. And because of this, our campaign will be working on three paths. The first will be to extend solidarity to those affected by governance droughts and who are being impacted by the state's inability and failure to manage its water resources. The second path through which this campaign will be focusing is to look at systemic risks to the water commons, those who are being impacted and whose access to water and the quality of water that they have access to is being challenged by certain systemic crises that we face in our country, such as mining, amongst other things. And then finally, the third path, according to which this campaign will be focused on, is around the climate crisis. food sovereignty, and the wider connection of climate risks and impacts to the greater crisis or poly-crisis that our society is facing. So with this, I will be walking everyone through our water campaign plan over the next couple of months. What we'll be focusing on in different phases of the campaign. We're currently with the launch of this assembly, are in the first phase of our campaign. And there are 2 other phases after this where our campaign will be going through different iterations and focusing on different things to expand on these 3 focus areas that I've just spoken about. So overall, with regards to our campaign and the launch of this campaign, we hope to build this climate justice charter movement and initiate grassroots mobilization to accelerate the deep just transition at the community level. So in the establishment of this water justice campaign in our communities, we also hope to identify ways in which we can lead and build convergences around this platform, help communities and our activists on the ground bring these various issues that the communities are facing into this transformative perspective around water. We want to raise public awareness on the crisis and its connection to climate justice through these different focus areas. We want to empower our communities through participatory water science and education so that they have a greater understanding of their agency with regards to this issue, but also the agency that they have to not wait for the states to pursue transformative adaptations and perspectives around what their community needs are, but for them to be the fundamental drivers of these changes. We hope to catalyze communities to help build deep just transition forums to build community resilience in facing these systemic and climate crises that we face, particularly around this issue of water. And we also hope to map out ways to build this climate emergency social contract, which Matthew was speaking about, help people be more resilient in being able to meet the needs of things such as firefighting, being more resilient in how they can engage the local governments with regards to this, their perspective around what is required to meet the climate crisis, creating these new bodies to manage water bodies such as rivers and other water resources around communities. We want to build public commons partnerships. So within this first phase that is being initiated now, key actions coming out of this assembly, which we'll be using to kick off this campaign, is to form local groups, regional and national groups around these 3 focus areas. We're going to be constructing campaign briefs also to put out, which are stating some of the goals that I'm speaking through in this assembly, some of the slogans and the targets that this campaign is trying to reach for. We'll be integrating insights from our Water Activist Guide, which will also be distributing for activists to use in their communities. Our Water Commons policy will be coming out of this campaign also towards the latter parts, and also Water Commons perspective material and leaflets for communities to use in organizing their activists around these issues of water, particularly around these 3 focus areas. We'll also be integrating, particularly within our 3rd focus area in the climate crisis perspective, we'll be integrating the importance of things such as fire services and flood management. Communities in KZN, which were hit by the flooding over the past 2 years, have been seriously affected once again. And this is part of what we are trying to achieve in this perspective around water through our campaign, is also to integrate an understanding that despite just water for use and our water needs, water is also important in our understanding of how do we manage and engage these kind of climate impacts such as floods and fires. So our leaflets and some of these materials that we'll be distributing will be helping activists and these community forums to also engage each other around these issues and see what they can do at that level. We'll also be helping to map out the institutional actors involved in addressing these issues at the local level to help communities know who to engage in and what ways to engage them. And then also we'll be engaging and mapping out key allies to engage around some of these issues. But then finally, once we draw this phase to a close, we'll also be initiating another assembly to consolidate the efforts and lessons learned from this first phase of the campaign. We'll be bringing all these grassroots forces and their mobilization work to the fore for the next phase of the campaign. Some of the things that we'll be doing also are what we'll be asking activists nationally and locally to engage in, is to work in these 3 groups that we'll be setting up around our campaign focus areas. Activists can partake in more than one group, obviously, if they're interested and are active and working on issues pertaining to more than one group. But at least with these 3 groups, we can also kind of crowd in and focus specifically on the 3 particular issues that each group is trying to address. As I said, we'll be creating a multimedia toolkit that we'll be distributing to activists so that they can enhance this work at the community level. But we ask that if activists are able to, if they can assist us also in translating some of these toolkits, because some communities may be communicating in languages outside of like the English language, for example. So activists who are more linguistically skilled in some of these other languages, maybe Xhosa, Afrikaans and such, could also help us in translating some of these infographics, posters and leaflets to help activists and community members in those communities that are not primarily strong in English to also understand some of this work and some of this information that is increasingly important for them to understand. We'll be distributing our water guides, and then we'll also be launching a digital campaign to help spread awareness. And we ask that activists can help us in spreading out this message and information that we'll be putting out in the campaign. And some of the themes that we're focusing around is obviously water justice now, end thirst, prevent fire and stop flooding, water for food sovereignty, and accelerate the deep, just transition to end governance droughts. So we're trying to focus clearly on delineating what these different areas speak to with regards to the broader perspective around water in our country. Once again, these are the 3 main groupings. So coming out of this this assembly, please reach out to myself and Lydia. We'll provide our details to let us know around which focus group you would like to work with, or if your local forum and activists that you are based with are primarily focused on, which ones you would like to be part of, so that we can bring people together around focusing around these major areas of crises. And then within the second phase of our campaign, coming out of this first phase, once we've hosted this second assembly to evaluate and present on what we've learned and some of the achievements from the first phase, we'll also expand on the understanding of the complexity of the crisis. So we'll be doing work around raising awareness in communities to simplify, or rather make more easily digestible some of this message around the complexity of the crisis. We'll be bringing our work that we've done and then enhancing that through the help of local forums and activists on the ground to help add to that. We'll be showing also how to connect these systemic problems. So we'll be also interlinking some of the work of the different groups to make more clear for people to understand how these things are conjoined through the work that activists will be doing. I will also be amplifying calls for the legal recognition of water and water bodies, drawing from some of the key points in our constitution, but also in the policies that we're currently developing around water. We'll have a number of webinars during this period to also help educate and bring to focus some of these issues. Examples from the systemic focus being issues around green hydrogen, for example, big issue coming into South Africa right now. You would have seen last week, the European Union has committed around 4.7 billion euros to South Africa. They're doubling down on some of the funding that was withdrawn by the United States for just energy transition. And some of this investment, is primarily around issues of green hydrogen and helping the local hydrogen sector in South Africa, but with a focus for exports, and that's going to affect communities. So these are some of the systemic issues that we need to engage in that's going to impact our water resources, and it's some of the work that we'll be doing in this campaign to highlight some of these issues. Water use in mining and mining affected communities is another one that we'll be doing something on to help educate and bring to the focus. the risk of fossil fuels in the water crisis, farming in the water crisis, and problematizing techno-fix. So just a range of different thematic and key issues that we'll be bringing out that we want to bring notice on. And then we'll also go back to communities at this phase to explain some of the work that had come out of that first phase, but also to keep communicating and bringing these issues that activists will be focused on out to make it clear and transparent in how we've been engaging with them throughout this process of the campaign. During this phase also, we'll be launching a national petition calling for constitutional recognition of the right to water and water sovereignty policies that we're developing that prioritize public and commons control over these resources. We'll be organizing door-to-door campaigns, community-led water audits. I'll be advocating for the free basic water allocation that activists and communities across the country have already been engaged in, fighting for water as a public good, particularly in some of these areas that have been affected by the systemic impacts of mining usage and other things such as green hydrogen, for example, which is coming around the corner. And also we'll be embarking on campaigns of water testing of available water, and also trying to distribute water testing kits to help communities and activists engage in this form of citizen science to have greater knowledge and understanding what is the quality of water that they're being exposed to. And then I'm just going to go to this third phase, just to be conscious of time. And then finally, in the final phase of the campaign, to see it out, we'll be hosting a final assembly to evaluate the lessons from the second phase. We're putting out our demands that are informed by our water policy. We'll be putting out our water policy during this phase. And then also we will be addressing the ways in which our policy speaks to national, regional, and local government. We'll also have another series of webinars during this period that speak to climate, water, food nexus. We're also going to talk about the climate extremes in the water system. So these will also more broadly draw on some of the perspectives that we put forward in our policy, speaking to what we've been doing through our activism during this campaign, but also towards the wider perspective of how water policy and our climate perspective is also going to integrate and interact with some of the other areas of focus that the movement and the charter has drawn out in the way in which Matthew spoke about in the climate emergency social contract. So we'll also be inviting people to help work with us on building these frameworks further through national working committees that will come out of these different focus groups that we're setting up in this phase. We'll launch structures to take these interventions forward, such as the river management, for example, and the fire risk forums. And then we'll also be launching our final media campaign to distribute and help expand on our perspectives that will be coming out of the policy, that will be showcasing some of the things that we've learned from community-based water solutions management and some of the people science initiatives that we'll be engaging in the second phase. And then also be promoting some of the collaborative efforts and stories of success in how we've been thinking around local management of water resources, highlighting these alternative solutions. And then I'd like to end just finally in terms of speaking about how the movement and this campaign in sustaining its momentum as we then go into our next campaigns will be transition efforts such as trying to establish permanent local water commons committees at the local level, developing an ongoing calendar of activities for water advocacy to build on the work that we've done throughout this campaign, making sure that the CJ local climate justice charter movement forums that are established in communities, and also helping communities to use our water commons policy to address the water crisis and transform the water system. So even once we've ended with the campaign, we will still be focusing on water in a sustained way, and the lessons that will come from this campaign will hopefully help build on the necessary activism that's required for a long-term implementation and shift in our water perspective nationally and locally that is in line with some of the policy work that we'll be establishing during this phase. So I will end it here, but I'd just like to ask Chair that before we go into any questions, can we hold those questions for the discussion after our final presentation.
Thank you, Awande. Yes, absolutely. I was just about to suggest that, as I see that our time is really moving fast. I'd like to call on Ferial Adam. She will be taking us through our approach, the Climate Justice Charter movement approach to the water policy. Welcome, Ferial.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, definitely. You're
Okay.
audible.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say that this policy that we're talking about has been many years in the making. And I actually think it's never been more relevant than it is right now. So I'm not sure if I need to talk like what is in the policy, but I will talk about the fact that it does the basics in terms of explaining and giving the context in terms of climate and water and the kind of the state of the water commons in South Africa. It analyzes the existing regulatory and policy measures, but it needs to be, I'm changing it at the moment because my concern is that the new policy, the amended National Water Act and National Water Services Act is opening the doors for privatization. And then if we think about the water commons, this is something that's very concerning. And what I've been toying with, and I think I've been trying to get my head around, is how do we be the first? And the CJCM has been the first on many of our policies. How do we be the first to actually show how this needs to work, where people are involved on the ground and it's not all just sold off to the private sector? So that's the challenges we're having in terms of the existing regulatory policy measures. And then we talk about a water commons from a deep, just transition. So we talk about how how do we achieve a deep, just transition given the existing, given an alternative policy. And I think it sets out very clearly that we need to be that early warning system as well as providing the alternatives and how things need to work. Because right now, I don't think anyone figures that people need to be involved in decision making in water. Water is very top down and very corporate, so it excludes a lot of people at the moment. But also it talks about the fact that saving and conserving water must become a social priority, and that we as people have the right to monitor industrial and agricultural use. And I think that that's something that governments and others don't think that we can do. But it goes beyond that. It talks about how do we look at, and I think this links to part of what Awande was saying, is how do we get to a point where we build a movement of plumbers that emerge, that can fix water leaks, that can provide alternative grey water solutions and not just keep relying on the existing? How do we expose the chemicals that exist? I still kind of shudder when I think of how government, when it chooses to, can go and tackle, the pollution and, the poison, so-called poisons it is poison because it's being sold at informal, what do you call it, shops and spaza shops. But the kind of idea was correct, but the targets were incorrect because obviously it was set in a system of xenophobia. But the bigger question is, like, that's the kind of thing we need to do, right? Which is what the policy is saying, is that there are these chemicals that should be banned. Why are we still using it in our daily use? Why are we still using it in South Africa when it's banned in almost half of the world? Why are we the dumping ground? And I was hoping that whole thing would have shifted the debate to that, but it didn't. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that the water policy looks at. And then also in terms of the large users, everyone talks about the water shortages, we don't have water, but no one's talking about how do we tackle, how do we engage with the people that are using the most water, the timber plantations, the commercial farmers, the mining, um, like, for example, and this is one that I'm adding in, which is a new one, which is the Limpopo economic zone, as it's come to known, is going to be chopping down um, indigenous trees in Limpopo to make way for this economic zone and roads and all of that. And I don't think that there's been a countrywide objection to that kind of thing. It's been very localized. And I think it's something that when we think about water, and this is what the policy does, is that water is not a standalone. And I think Awande also said it now, is that you've got to connect it to everything. You've got to connect it to these kind of developments. You've got to connect it to food systems. You've got to connect it to indigenous plants, etc. And that is something. So that's where the kind of work that the CJCM will do. I think that we're still finding that our water is very top down, and I'll give you an example, and very bureaucratized and hierarchical. Um, the civil society voices are almost like a noise. It's not really being heard, and often we do have the solutions. There's a big Indaba happening next week, and civil society has not, like organizations have not been invited, but business has been invited. And that's still the kind of thing that's happening. There's also the issue of, we talk about in the policy about a water that ensures safe delivery, but also fair pricing of water. And new to the policy, which is the updates, is that Rand Water has requested an increase of the amount that municipalities will pay for water. But it's a very flawed system, and I don't know how. And I wanted to actually get to sit with a few, like Awande, Vish, and just talk some of these things out, because they new problems and they update our policy significantly. And then, of course, there's the technical and science aspects, where everyone thinks that it's water, so we need technical and science expertise, and we need that kind of solutions and innovative, so-called innovation. And what I'm seeing is a push for desalination. And we know that desalination is not always the best solution in South Africa. It's still kind of that same kind of big projects with expense. And it's harmful to the marine environment. So we haven't, it's when they talk technical and science, we need to be on the pulse and say, what do you mean by that? And they only always talk about technical in desalination, big dams, big projects. They don't talk about the localized innovative ideas like rainwater harvesting, like reusing water, like gray water, which that then gets people involved and builds that movement, rather than having this top-down approach or a very corporate approach to our water. In a summary of what we have, I think we need to redefine the water commons, not redefine, but define the water commons in a stronger manner, and making the linkages. We need to link to the climate extremes, because, as you know, a lot of the climate impacts are felt through water, whether it's through droughts or through floods. And then we need to, and I think the campaign that Awande has spoken about already starts doing this, is the water awareness campaign. And then how do we redistribute the water commons? And one of the ideas we had was, how do we map the water commons areas, like where we should not be developing on those areas? Can we still find those areas? So democratizing and reshaping the kind of the plans, the budgets, the implementation, because there's still a lot of problems. And how do we, one of the practical things is creating local water commons committees in communities, etc. So how do we do that? And and then management of dams. If you looked at what most of our dams are in a bad condition, they need upgrading, but also government still focuses on developing big dams. So if you look at the budget speech, they were very proud of the money that will be going to these mega projects. And I don't know when they're going to realize mega projects don't actually work for the kind of situation we have with regards to climate, with regards to people, and with regards to our water. So those are some of the kind of the key things that was in the water commons. It's the nice thing is that what we've done is through identifying this, building a policy that talks about building from the ground up, is now being done through our campaigns that One Day has talked about. I don't think there's anything more that I can cover. I think it's all been covered from what's been said. But this is for us the deep just transition that and obviously it's a water policy, so we're saying that the deep just transition is more than energy. It has to take into account the food system, water systems, energy, well, of course energy, but transport, all of that. That is reimagining water governance. And yeah, that's in a nutshell the policy. I don't know if I've covered it all or if I was doing the wrong thing. But I will wait to hear from my bosses One Day. And Lydia, Comrade
Oh
Lydia.
my word. Comrade, really, I was having so much fun listening to you, and now you're telling me, did I say everything? I wonder if you would like to just engage with Ferial before we go into our discussion, just to see if she's missed anything, or is there anything that she could have added which you would most probably know about?
No, I think that was a good overview. It spoke to the perspective of what we're speaking around the campaign and this assembly, and I think that I'm sure attendants have more questions for Farrell, which will be better suited than anything with regards to like my perspective, because it's for the assembly to engage.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ferial, for your insightful contribution. I think that it was plain. It is digestible. We could all take takeaways away from there and see where we can apply it. Um, I remember during the crisis, the water crisis here in Cape Town, many communities were rationed to having 5 to 20 liters per day for themselves. And the outrage that they felt at that time when you drive past a golf course and you see the lush greens, you see the sprinklers going on, and just the pure injustice as to, like Comrade Ferrier also said about the corporate and top-down approach. Those ideas that were evident in and during that time really had a very negative impact on our communities, whereas they felt that they are rationed to use so much water when the elite had the full of having a day at the golf course. The South African breweries who did not stop with manufacturing also during that time, using millions and millions of liters of water. So we can now discuss a One Day's contribution about the campaign that's being launched today, and we can also engage with Ferial about the water policy of the Climate Justice Charter movement. I can open the floor to any questions, where you can just raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat box, and then we will just speak to the two presenters and see if you need some clarity on some of the issues that they have brought forth. The floor is yours. And also, what I wanted to add, I'm sorry, I actually forgot. One day you mentioned about the new push for green hydrogen and quite a water intensive operation that. and it reminded me of the Koeberg nuclear plant here in Cape Town, using millions and millions of water per day. We are looking at webinars to kind of unpack that and see what it is that society, civil society, and the normal activist out there, what can we bring to the table? How can we dissect this thing that there is a push for greater water usage when we are a water scarce country? I think Elizabeth had a hand up.
Hi, Lydia. Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. I just wanted to say, sorry, I don't want to detract focus. I think everything that you guys have said is so, so cool. I'm kind of new to the CJCM and I've sort of been trying to get involved, but I don't really know where to start. So I don't know, yeah, like these initiatives are so cool, but I kind of feel like I don't even know what my role could be in them. So I'd really appreciate, I know you guys are all very busy, but I'd really just love to help. So I don't know if there's any way I can like chat to someone just like where to start off, because I'd really love to get involved. I just don't know where to start. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Is Awande or Charles available to connect with Elizabeth?
Or yeah, or even if it's not during this call, because I know there's lots to discuss. But yeah, if you can just tell me someone I could like email after this. Yeah, it's just as someone who's new to all of this stuff, I really do
Sorry,
want to help, but I just don't know where to start. Thanks.
Lydia, can I come in?
Yes, please, Farrell.
So, Elizabeth, where do you stay?
In Johannesburg.
Okay, because I think that in terms of the Johannesburg region, I mean, the campaign that one day talked about where there's water testing, etc.
Mm,
It would be good for us to develop a Joburg CJCM water group and then to actually get water tested, etc. So that is something that I think where you can get involved directly. And maybe even because some of us are hectic, I mean, we may need someone that can coordinate that and see that everyone's doing their testing, etc. But we
yeah,
open to suggestions from Charles, and I see other hands are up.
thank you, Farrell.
Thank you so much, Farrell, for engaging with Elizabeth. Rashida Muller, you have your hand up. Please go ahead. Rashida, you have to unmute yourself. Rashida, you're still muted. One day, please, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Sorry, my network is being mischievous today, but I was just to say also I'd missed my last statement to Elizabeth was also that as I was saying now in the overview that we're establishing working groups coming out of this assembly on our 3 focus areas. So for those who are interested in a particular area with regards to contributing and thinking around these issues around the climate, the water crisis, you can also, when you reach out, also just let us know which areas you particularly interested in, and we can, from that point then on, also find a way for you to also contribute to the campaign.
Thanks so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Wande. Comrade Charles, is there any way that you can unmute Rashida?
Hi, Comrade Chair. Unfortunately, I can't. I can only ask Comrade Rashida to unmute. I'm going to try and make her a co-host and see if that will help.
Yeah, she said she's got some issues unmuting herself. While we're waiting on that, are there any other questions, comrades?
Yes, there is a question from me, Comrade. Just like Comrade, I wanted to say more about the different working groups that will be set up. And also, is there like a campaign slogan, something we can tweet, post on social media to get the campaign out there and things like that? Thanks.
Thank you, Charles. So the three working groups are on the water crisis, extending solidarity to our governance failures, to those affected by our governance failures, sorry. So we'll be focused around some of the problems that people have been seeing and facing with regards to infrastructural mismanagement, and some of the other governance failures around the provision of water. The second working group's focus is around systemic risks to the water commons and transformative adaptation. This group will be looking at 3 or 4 issues at both the local and national level with regards to some transformative demands around addressing and pushing back against issues with regards to hydrogen, green hydrogen, water usage, mining, the extractive industry and its water usage and how it's affecting communities, desalination and some of its problems, amongst others. So that's the second working group around the transformative adaptation and systemic risks to the water commons. And then the final working group is around climate crisis, food sovereignty, and the greater poly crisis. This working group is focused on aspects of disaster management, so fire management and the risk of flooding, and also other 3 or 4 transformative demands around the need for water for food sovereignty and for people to be able to meet their subsistence needs, and also how the use of water and the crisis of water feeds into the wider poly crisis that our society faces. So those are the 3 various working groups, extending solidarity around our governance droughts and government mismanagement, systemic risks to the water commons, and the climate crisis, food sovereignty, and poly crisis. So coming out of this assembly, if you're interested in one of these 3 focus areas or more than one, as I said, I'll be leaving my details and Lydia's details also. You can reach out to us to find out which working group, to tell us which working group you'd like to be a part of. And we'll be working at both the national and the local levels. There'll be local forums and local working groups that are being set up across our different provinces, which will also be coming together with a national working group where all these local groups are converging around some of these issues. And then also on the other point Charles raised in terms of slogans or key words that you can tweet out also with regards or message out on digital media space, but some of these will also be in the materials that we'll be distributing. Or water justice now, end thirst, prevents fire and stop flooding, water for food sovereignty, water commons is life, let's control it together, and accelerate the deep just transition to end governance droughts. So this also will be distributed. We'll have a press statement coming out of this assembly and also a more compact form of this campaign overview to hand out to activists to get working together in their local forums. We will be sending this out also.
Thank you, Conrad. I have a question in the chat. Will we have access to the documents presented today, please? And that's from Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hi. Is that Roshida?
Yes, I managed to unmute.
Oh
so
my
sorry.
goodness. Welcome.
Thank
Please
you
go ahead.
so much. Yes, may I just say my small twopence?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much for this meeting. And it's so very important, especially for food sovereignty. I want to emphasize the challenges that we have and with the small informal farmers who don't have access to enough water. And I think that is where I would play my focus or want to be involved as, part of the informal sector, that our small informal businesses, especially the agri ones, are having a lack of, well, it's land plus water. But for this focus today, I would say that we need to look at their needs and how we can access the water to them. And I'm so glad to have heard Ferial speak, Dr. Ferial, speaking on that, the commons need to take control of what's happening, and that we should object to these big, huge private tizations of water in the future. I'm so sorry for that. I'll just put it off. I just want to say that I'm glad to be part of this, and as part of the informal sector nationally, I think I would like to join where it will assist in the small farmers. I think we will do a drive out throughout the provinces to see where our informal farmers are struggling with the access of water. And then in each province, we could, find out how serious it is, and that will, be driven by NITASA as a national organization to support informal business. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rashida. Appreciate it. Can I just read one comment and question in the chat? And I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. It is Matunjwa Kavaka, and he's from Namibia, and he's considering Namibia faces similar challenges such as water crisis, green hydrogen projects, and oil discoveries. Can we replicate the ideas of the Climate Justice Charter movement in Namibia? How can trade unions and civil society collaborate to adapt these strategies for a just transition and climate resilience in our national context? And then there's another one, and then there's some article that was posted by Dr. Ferriel about the responses to day 0. And yes, Elizabeth, please, if you could email Charles. And yeah, I see that he answered as well. Could someone just please respond to the gentleman from Namibia?
Hi, Matunju. I think that it would actually the Climate Justice Charter movement is not necessarily just a movement facing and thinking around the issues as it pertains to South Africa in particular, but we're thinking with regards to the wider context of the crisis beyond just our borders, but for the whole African continent. It was not part of our presentation today, but part of our climate emergency policy platform and our climate justice deal document, which thinks around the macroeconomic context within the South African context, also calls for a climate justice deal for Africa. It's climate justice deal for Africa and South Africa. So our perspectives are linked. We're happy that you're in our space, but reach out also, and we can speak more further around how we can take this movement beyond our borders, but also find a way to integrate these perspectives within your context, within the Namibian context, which is so closely aligned with ours. Comrade Lydia also is also another good resource to speak to, who is our campaigns secretary, who's also been engaging with other civil society collaborators and labor as well. But trade unions also need to find a way to integrate with society and communities. Unionists, labor, you're part of communities, workers from communities. So there's also a way in which I think that you can expand these perspectives, and that labor must also see and find ways to engage with how the communities they come from are affected by these issues. And I think dialogue such as this is the beginning. But as I said, you can reach out. I'll put my details in the chat, and we can communicate further.
Thank you, comrade. I appreciate it. Thank you, Nina, for that observation. Yes, we are. And thank you for just being part of this assembly. And we will further engage with everyone as the first phase kicks off. Are there any other questions for clarity? Or if you just want to put it in the chat, or if you want to put up your hand, that is also very welcome.
Comrade Lydia, may I say something quickly?
Please go ahead,
Thanks.
Matthew.
Just to say to Mthunju and Elizabeth, these are really interesting questions of how can we do it in our context and what can we do? And I think the answer to that is basically what we've been doing as a climate justice charter is trying to work from below. So what is happening in your community? What strengths? What kind of contextual specificity? What's happening around you is so important. And it's not to have tools and then hope that you use them in your community, but it's to find ways in which the work that you're already doing and the work that you could possibly do connects with your context, but also the work that we're doing. So we want to empower you as Awande, Lydia, and Ferial was saying, but also we want you to empower us in many ways, and we want to develop collaboration. So we're so excited to speak to how your work works in Joburg or Namibia, and how we can provide tools, resources, but also how we can collaborate and connect our struggles. As we say, we're endorsed by 200 and almost 300 organizations and communities across South Africa, and it's really that process of working with communities and empowering communities that is fundamental to the CJC politics. So we look forward to being in conversation, and Charles has given an email address there.
Okay, thank you so much, comrade. Are there any specific questions for Dr. Ferial regarding the CJCM water policy? Okay, Kush, I've noticed your message in the chat. Like we've spoke before when we were at the activist school, we had this conversation as to you establishing a working group in your area. I will get in touch with you within this week still, and then we can have a further discussion about how to assist to establishing your working group. I hope that covers your question. Thank you so much. So if there are no other further questions for clarity, even for Awande or Matthew, or even Dr. Ferial, please, this is your chance. Any questions for clarity, any suggestions, any ideas as to collaboration, and we can take this forward.
Hi there, may I ask a question? Sorry, I didn't put my hand up.
No, it's fine, Nina. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just interested to know what formal water research organizations we're already working with and consulting with vis-a-vis evolution of policy, etc. You know, people that are doing water research on the ground, you know, earth observatories, that kind of scientific backing to kind of provide direct empirical evidence of stuff happening on the ground, you know, regarding how badly communities are affected? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nina, for your question. I'm not seeing Ferial online. No, she's not online. Wanda, would you care to answer that question, please?
Hi, Nina. Unfortunately, the person who is best posed to answer that question is Ferial. She is our resident science expert, water policy. But Ferial is one of our preeminent activists around the issue of water, having done her PhD on water and water science and citizen science. So she would have been better posed, unfortunately, to have answered that specific question.
Thanks, Wanda. Just a follow-up to that. Funnily enough, last week at a presidential climate commission, Blechotla in Gqeberha, Port Elizabeth, there were a whole bunch of related people exhibiting, and the Africa Earth Observatory Network, which is doing citizen science in the Karoo, is doing exactly what we need, which is analyzing water resource with the intention of linking to lobbying efforts. So they're focusing on the Karoo. I'd be really interested, because I'm in the Eastern Cape. I'm interested in small farmer, food sovereignty, water access. But this Africa Earth Observatory Network is only focusing on the Karoo, as I said, and it would be really nice to link into scientists who are, you know, who can bring the big guns, as it were, with their empirical evidence of how devastated the, you know, water situation is in local areas, in order to give us fuel for linking and lobbying with local municipalities, etc. Those are just observations.
Thank you. I think that's a very valuable input, and we'll definitely look into that and try to see how we can integrate some of that work and those perspectives. And I think that our systemic and our climate crises focus also give us the capacity to look into that. And I think that there are lessons that we can learn from some of that work and that framing around the Karoo that I think will also be applicable to other parts of our country that are similarly impacted or similarly situated with regards to their kind of climatic conditions, like the Northwest and Limpopo, for example, which I think could benefit from that kind.
One day. I think he fell off. I'm so sorry, Nina. Maybe he will come back and he will just put it in the chat as to the rest of his message. Joan, I saw your text message. Would you like, I saw your hand up now as well. Would you like to go ahead if there's another part of your question?
Sure. Thanks very much, everybody, and hello. We're based on the south coast of KZN, and we've been dealing with water issues for a very, very long time. I would like to, well, it's very hard because we are just a few and there's so much going on. What I would like to know is there a group also that's focusing on mining? Because we've just had a mine arrive down here in Umzumbi, a lithium mine that parachuted in from nowhere. And we understand from what we've read, from what we've heard, the water impacts are going to be chronic. They've actually even said in their EIA that one of the estuaries is just kind of going to be destroyed. It's a sort of casualty of capitalism, really. And that here our business, our main income generating business is tourism. And so anything that impacts our blue flag beaches, one would think would have everybody jumping up and down. But the same people that promote the blue flag beaches are the ones that have welcomed this investment into our area. So I'm looking for somebody that can perhaps help us with water usage on mines. I know lithium isn't very well known yet in this country, but anybody with mining experience and water that I could perhaps link up with, I'd appreciate that. And then also, as I said, if there are other organizations that are close or relatively close to us, because we need numbers and we can't go and do it all ourselves. We really need to gather the troops. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Joan. Yes, absolutely. We need the numbers. I'm going to put my details in the chat. Could you please get hold of me? But I'd like to answer your question. You said that you are in the Eastern Cape. I do know that there are quite a few mining
No,
licenses that.
Eastern, the South Coast. We're not
Oh,
the
the
Eastern
South
Cape.
Coast.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know about a few mines on that side that has got the mining permits been given, and like you said, they just parachuted in. The very same is happening in Newcastle, and I'm engaging with that comrades there as well. So I will put my details in the chat, and you can get hold of me even after this call. Then I can engage with you a little bit further on how to assist, as well as what resources I will be able to make available for you, and how to capacitate yourself and whoever is in your area that is basically in this with you. Thank you so much, Joan. I appreciate
you.
Your concerns, and I will put my details in the chat now. Ferial, there was a question earlier on about the water policy, and I think that you just left us momentarily, but you're back. Could you just engage with that, please? I think Nina asked that question. Ferial, you're still muted.
Sorry, Lydia, my connection's really bad. I missed what you said to me.
There was a question in the chat about the water policy, if there's more clarity from your side.
In terms of?
Um,
Sorry, I
I
can't
will
see the
just go
chat
back.
either. I had
Yeah,
to disconnect from my laptop and join on my phone.
all right, I'm just checking now I can't find it. Maybe I can ask Nina to just pose the question again. Nina, could you just pose your question again, please? Unfortunately, it doesn't look like she. Nina, you need to unmute yourself. All right. Okay. I'll get that thingy back. Joan, is that a new hand or an old one?
Sorry. Okay.
Okay, fine. I will now put my details in the chat. There's another hand of yours. I think you have got two. Yeah, all right. Any other further questions for clarity before we give over to Dr. Vish Professor Vish, the People's Professor, for his closing remarks? Anyone else? Feel free to raise your hand or put in the chat. All right. Professor Vish.
Comrade Vish, Lydia. Good afternoon, comrade.
It's Comrade Professor. Comrade
Comrade
Professor.
Professor, the people's professor.
No. So, comrades, good afternoon. And I'm just going to amplify a few points that came out from what has been said so far. We've heard a lot about this idea of the water commons. And I think it's very important to reinforce this idea that water is part of our commonwealth. It actually doesn't belong to anyone. Our policies talk about it as a public good, which is a good thing because that's what it means in terms of being a common. Um, it's also something that is a life enabling system. Without water and the water cycle and so on, we cannot survive as human beings. So it's very, very critical for the reproduction of life, as we all know. But it's also about ensuring that all of us within our communities, towns, cities, villages, etc., we all play a part in governing and controlling this resource. This is very, very important for how we're thinking about this idea of the water commons. What we're trying to do, comrades, is upend the current structures, the governing structures, the architecture, the institutions, and so on that have been managing water, but they're really running into crisis. Our water planning is in crisis. Our institutions are in crisis, there's corruption, there's criminalization, etc., etc. That's pushing our society actually towards a collapse of its water systems. So again, we want to reclaim the water commons from below. This is a crucial thrust in this campaign. I think the second point I just want to underline, comrades, is that we are really trying to place climate justice struggle and politics at the center of society. That's what we're trying to do with this campaign and many more to come. We want to go beyond what climate justice politics has been associated with, just lobbying the power structure or just having a crowd and doing symbolic politics. No. What we want to do, comrades, is figure out the problems, the systemic problems that need to be transformed as part of the deep just transition. The water crisis is one of those problems, and we want to figure that out with you and society so that we get society to own the problem, but also own the solution. This is the kind of transformative activism that we are trying to mainstream, comrades. It's no longer about us, expecting the elites or basically engaging in self-indulgent resignation and despair and so on. No, there are problems here that require deep transformation, and we need to do a politics that gets society to own the problems and the solutions to accelerate the deep just transition. The other quick point I want to make, comrades, is that this is a national platform. And that means that, as Matthew said, we've got 289 organizations. Now, it's a challenge for all of us. We want to test these organizations to endorse the charter. We want each of you who might be aware of an organization or sit in an organization that might have endorsed the charter to rally them. I think somebody, Joan, made the point about rallying the troops. I don't like military metaphors, but I do think that we need to rally the base. It's very, very important. And so let's use this campaign over the next 6 months to dynamize the base of the CJCM, comrades. Let's bring organizations closer. There's going to be several phases, as Awande said. We're going to have a dynamic program. We're going to be bringing in some of the top people that work on water like Ferial and others, to speak to us, to shed light on the complexities, the solutions with us, etc., etc. So there's going to be an exciting platform for the next 6 months to really empower society, empower ourselves to understand these issues. So let's crowd in people, let's network people in, let's build the positive solidarities. When I say positive solidarities, comrades, I'm saying solidarities around the alternatives that we want for the country around the water crisis and challenge. So we have 6 months of campaigning ahead of us, comrades. If we look back after 6 months, what do we want to see? We want to see many of you participating in the working groups, owning this campaign, shaping this campaign, defining this campaign. We want to see networks coming out of this, connections. Again, yes, there are many people on this call who are at the front line of fighting coal extraction and other forms of mining. Please, comrades, follow up with all the contact information that has been shared. We will network you all in. We also want to see water commons committees, comrades. Why? Because the water problem is not going to disappear. The way we've conceived of this campaign as a transformative campaign, as Awande said, yes, it's about the immediate, but it's also about the bigger systemic risks. Okay, green hydrogen was mentioned. There's also effluent in our water systems. Our water catchment areas are in a disastrous state, except these are the systemic risks. There's no investment in water infrastructure and so on. But the other level is the connection with the poly crisis and the worsening climate crisis, which is going to bring floods, which is going to bring droughts, which is going to bring fires, etc. So the narrative we're building around this campaign, comrades, connects all these levels up. And this is very, very important. And so in 6 months' time, we want to have impacted society with this kind of narrative. So people understand the different levels of this challenge. We all understand it, and we are all able to act on it at these different levels. So, comrades, this is for us a very important turning point in the liftoff of the Climate Justice Charter movement. There will be rolling campaigns. After the 6 months, we're going to roll out a Rights of Nature campaign because biodiversity is as important as water in the struggle for climate justice. And we also have to look at more than human life relations. We have to look at the broader web of life and so on. And we're going to have to look at rivers and how we declare rivers sacred and so on and so on. This is where we have to go to with this kind of campaigning. So there'll be a lot of overlaps with the next round of campaigning and so on. The other quick point, comrades, is this big idea of the climate emergency social contract that Matthew and others have mentioned. And basically, it's a proposition, comrades, to unite society around this climate emergency, okay? Now, a big idea like this should have actually come from the Presidential Climate Commission. But the fact of the matter is that the Presidential Climate Commission is looking for low-hanging fruit. It does not want to disrupt markets. It wants to leverage within the framework of the existing power structures, etc., etc. Essentially, it wants to normalize the problem. We cannot normalize the problem. We are facing a 1.5 degrees Celsius overshoot between 2028 and 2034. We will be at 3 degrees Celsius. Our food and water systems will be devastated by what's coming. So again, we've got to be able to position these ideas at the center of society. And every campaign we launch, including this one, is going to make that connection. So in other words, it's not an elitist idea. As we work it through with society, owning the problems, owning the solutions, we also want society to own the bigger political proposition as well. So comrades, there's a lot to do over the next few months, but also the next few years as part of these rolling campaigns. I think a big thank you is owed to Awande, Ferial, and Lydia for navigating us to this point, shaping a campaign document and a focus, working on a climate policy, climate justice policy on water, which again has been in the making for many years, bottom up, etc. And we'll further input into it as we go down this road, but we'll also launch it. And of course, thank you to all of you for making the time and sharing your questions, your concerns, your suggestions, and wanting to volunteer to step up, etc. So comrades, the task at hand is let's root the CJCM at the center of society. Let's get this campaign to have feet and legs and warm bodies driving it. Amandla, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, comrade. Appreciate it. Ferial, can I read the question to you in the chat from Nina?
Yes, please go ahead, Lydia. I also just want to say thank you, Comrade Vish. That was a really good summary and really energizing to hear that. And I'm very motivated to move.
Together.
Great. Okay, so Nina says she was just asking for examples of which water-focused, specialist, science-based water organizations we are already networked into and working with. And then she gave an example of Africa Earth Observatory Network doing citizen science in Karoo, researching water resource on ground to link into advocacy efforts as an example.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is it's a good suggestion, and I don't think we've actually connected with others at the moment. I know that tomorrow, Thursday, the Water Research Commission is launching a citizen science association, but also a lot of these groups, Lydia, have been using citizen science data for not the kind of activism that we know, and it's been great. It's very useful. It has its purpose, but it's been very kind of science-based. And what we're doing as the CJCM is marrying the activism and the climate justice to a science justice. And that's where we differ and how we use the information. So yeah, I think all of those are very relevant. But even AEON, I think that they use it in a different way that the CJCM, but there's no reason why we can't collaborate on data on building the network for sure. We can, and if people have more examples, to please send them to you so that we have them on our list.
Thank you so much, Comrade. Nina, are you still with us? Yes. Does that cover your question?
Totally. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Lynette DeBrain Davids, you had your hand up earlier. Is there anything that you want to add? All right. She has problems with unmuting herself. Lynette?
Hello. Hi, Lydia.
Hi. Hi, you had your hand up, ma'am.
Okay. I would just like to add on the question that Nina just was asking. Yeah, in the Overberg, in the side of Cape Town, of the Western Cape, I did fight for a few years on the water and recycling, as you know. But the thing is, so I managed to get a youth group who's going to do the citizen science from this month, from the 20th. We're going to have a big meeting, so I will keep you in the loop, Lydia, around that, because now people wants to have this meeting with us, and so we are involved with we have the meeting with who's going to be involved. It's the Blue Deal, the Dutch company, and then it's going to be the Breda Horitz catchment, and then it's going to be our municipality, TVK municipality, and then Soul Food Community Organization, our organization. So what I would like to say on that is that we really fight hard on the ground, because we know that our waters are very, very it's dirty, and we see it every day, because this week our taps was brown again and stuff, and so I hear Nina, what Nina's saying. So for me, it's I'm just scared people will come and grab what you work hard for, and that's why I'm so grateful for CJCM, and to so that I can come back and ask for some assistance here, because I don't want hard work going in the loop, and some other people come and take all this glory and things, in my words, and stuff. So thank you to that. Yes, I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynette. I can really say that she's really working hard in her community. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and she's establishing her working groups, her community forums, and she's really taken on a lot in her community, and not only where she lives, in the surrounding areas as well. Ferial, Comrade Ferial, is there any possibility that we could get some testing kits, just so that I can take it to the Grabouw area?
Of course we can. Yes, definitely. Just let me know how many and where to send them.
Okay, cool. I will definitely let you know. Give me a day or so.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Anyone else? Is there any questions? Any thing that you would like to say? Because we have come to the end of our People's Assembly. And thank you to those. Joan, you have your hand up again? A new one?
It is a new hand. Thank you very much.
Okay, please
I
go ahead.
wanted to do a special thank you to Comrade Vish for bringing up the rivers and using the term that we have been using about our Umzimkhulu, which is sacred. And that is something that we are promoting, a thing called the Sacred River Route, that to try and protect it along every step of the way. So hearing it come out of somebody else's mouth was just wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Comrade Vish. There is quite a lot that we can do and we will do. Sacred River Route sounds beautiful. Comrades, we've, like I said, come to the end of our People's Assembly, and from myself and from the team as well. Maybe they will give a word of thanks, but from my side, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, where we brought forth so many issues within our communities as well, and what this Climate Justice Charter movement will be doing for the next 6 months. We look forward to having you join us again. Awande, is there anything else that you would like to say?
Nothing more but to say that my contacts are in the chat. Please reach out to myself or Lydia if you would like to work with us in any working groups or set up local working groups. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, everybody. Then this is the moment. This is the moment that we say goodbye, but we will definitely meet again. Please get in contact with Awanda and myself, and we will definitely be able to assist with your queries, your points of clarity, or any assistance that you might need to establish these groups in your areas. Thank you so much, everybody. Goodbye.